Can you guys see that? That little space, I was this close to giving up. I'm telling you. Let's get into it. Okay guys, so today is not a technical video at all. We're not talking any gear. We're not talking mixing techniques, nothing like that. You've got so much of that stuff out there already for you to go check out. Sometimes I feel like these videos are more important than those kind of videos because there's not a lot of these out there, the more life experiences as an engineer. So I think it's super important for you guys to hear a lot of this kind of stuff. So there will be lots of gear and mixing stuff further down the road, but for today, we're talking about some valuable information. And I hope it helps some of you guys out throughout your journey in this thing of engineering that we all love. And I say that a lot, but it really hits home. To give you some backstory, I've only had 2 jobs my entire life. One of them, engineering, which I'm doing currently. And the second one, right before that, was working at a grocery store. I worked in the deli at Sobeys when I was about 15 or 16 years old, and I worked there for, I want to say, about 5 years. And then after that is when I moved out to Toronto to kind of pursue my life in music. And we're gonna get back to why that's important, but throughout your journey as an engineer, there will be times, and there has been in my life, where I've said, oh God, I can't do this anymore, or it's so difficult, or there's so many obstacles, or I'm sacrificing way too much. Trust me, if that hasn't hit you already, it is going to hit you. Engineering, freelance engineering, when you're just doing your own thing, you're running your own business, is difficult. I repeat, it is very difficult. Let me say that right to the mic. If you just think engineering is some fun thing, you're just mixing all day and recording all these people, and people are just flooding to you to use your services or use your studio, that's not the case. You really have to grind and put in the work to build into that whole big business that you guys want. It's not just going to come easy. I can tell you that right now. And especially for somebody doing it on their own like I did and didn't have any mentors or anything like that, if you guys are in that same boat, I'm telling you right now, it is difficult and you're going to have to weather the storm a lot. I'm not trying to sit here and scare any of you or discourage any of you, but I just like to be real. I like the transparency. That's the whole reason why I started this YouTube channel, is because I want to be as transparent as possible with you guys. And to some of you, it might scare you, and it might scare you in a good way, but I always mean well, and you guys know that. So engineering is hard. The actual aspect of engineering, if you're good at it, is not necessarily hard, but the whole process of getting to having a successful business or a successful studio or mixing job is difficult. And there will be times where you say, I can't do this anymore. And I want to give you guys some knowledge or just ways that you can curve around these ideas if and when they come into your head. So when I moved to Toronto, downtown, at my old condo is when I started engineering and decided I want to do this full time. I'm not going to have any other job. I'm just going to commit my life to this, and hopefully it works. And thankfully it did. But I was in a condo and my studio was in the living room. It wasn't even in its own isolated room or anything. It was just in a big wide open living room. And I had my desk right against the window kind of thing. The acoustics were not great by any means, but I made that work for years because that's really all I could afford and do at the time. When I was working there, the way my building was situated, it was right across the street, coincidentally, from a Sobeys grocery store, the exact same grocery store chain that I worked at in Winnipeg when I was growing up. And the first couple years were difficult. I've made videos about this before, you guys can go back and watch them, but they were difficult because I didn't have any excess income coming in from anywhere else. It was only from what I was doing engineering. Granted, I had a bit of money saved from working at Sobeys prior to those years before I moved to Toronto. So I had a little bit of money that I was sitting on that I can make myself kind of float by a little bit, because that first year was tough. I've talked about this before. I think I made $18,000 from engineering the whole year of my first year engineering. So that was tricky because my rent alone was, I think, $1,000 at the time. So when you take that 12 grand out from the 18, I wasn't left with much. So thankfully I had a little bit that I was sitting on, like I said, that kind of smoothed it out a little bit for that first year. But the second year, you know, it was better for sure, but it was still not great. And there were times where I was really struggling because that kind of bit of cash that I was sitting on was depleted by that second year. So there was a lot of times where I would just scrape by enough to pay my rent and to have enough to put food on the table for myself and, you know, whatever else, basic needs and expenses. So I'd be sitting there at my desk, looking out the window and looking down at the Sobeys that was directly across the street. And I kept telling myself, hey, Ty, maybe you should just go to the deli, apply. You can get a part-time job and you can just work that while you're trying to kind of get this business going. And there were so many times I said, just go do it. And I almost did it one time. I put my stuff on. I remember it was winter because I was, you know, not the greatest season for engineers. Well, for me anyways, it wasn't. So there was a time where I put my coat on and I had a resume and I had all my Sobeys stuff on there. And I almost went down to Sobeys to hand it in just to get a part-time job so I could put a bit of extra money in my pocket. And I don't know what it was, but something just distracted me or whatever. I can't even remember exactly, but something distracted me and I kind of put the resume down for a second. Maybe I took my coat off and then I just kind of sat for a second and then I said, do I really want to do this? Do I want to go work at Sobeys? Because yeah, it's a safe, easy bet. I'm sure they'll probably hire me within a second from my experience working there before, but it's gonna take away from me putting my all into this engineering thing. And I just said, don't do it. Don't do it, Ty. You can weather the storm. Coincidentally, I remember there was a big snowstorm at that time. Again, this was winter, so in winter in Canada, not pretty. But anyways, for whatever reason, I didn't. I crumpled the resume up, I threw it in the recycling bin and just sat down at my desk and just worked. I can't remember what I was doing. Maybe I was working on some beats or something at the time because the engineering itself wasn't as busy. But whatever I did, I just sat down and did it. And like I said, there were times before that where I considered it. I'd be staring at the Sobeys sign saying, just go get a job, go get a part-time job. But that one time specifically was the one time I really almost did it. And for whatever higher power or whatever told me just hold off, don't do it, thank you. Because I think if I would have done that, I probably would have got comfortable and maybe just turned that part-time job into a full-time job just because it's guaranteed easy money. Whereas doing this engineering is not guaranteed anything. Even to this day specifically, this year, I love to be transparent with you guys. This has not been my greatest year in business. I've definitely had better years that, you know, have paid more or just financially been better overall than this year currently. I think a lot of things are happening in the world right now. So people are cutting back on a lot of expenses. And if music is only kind of a part-time gig for some artists or producers, they're cutting back on their spending on it. So a lot of times people that would come to me 3 times a month for a song, mixing, mastering, all that, they're only coming once a month now. Maybe they're coming once every 2 months, something like that. So don't get me wrong, I'm good, but it's not as good as previous years for sure. And there's always going to be ups and downs in this engineering world. That's just how it is. It's how I've been my entire career. There's been good years, there's been bad years, there's been subpar years where they're just, you know, you're good, but you're not saving anything. There's been years where I've been in the hole, where I haven't made, or just my yearly expenses, my condo, groceries, whatever else I'm spending money on, I've actually been in the negative. I haven't covered my basic needs. You know what I mean? So that is going to happen. And especially earlier on in your career when you're not as established and you're just kind of getting your feet off the ground, that's going to happen. And you're going to come into these situations where you say, oh, I can't do this. I need something else. And again, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you my personal experiences that worked for me. So if you have to get a job and you really that's the only thing you can do to pay your rent for the month, please do it. I'm not saying to not do it, but if you can stretch it a little bit, try to hold off. Hustle even harder than you ever have hustled before. Put in the work on Instagram, work on Reels, work on TikTok videos, work on content like crazy, because that's where the game is right now, is a lot of content-based stuff. And just put that time in and really hustle and grind to try to get to where you need to be. And if that's just scraping by, that's totally fine, because I scraped by for a long time. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to know that if you weather the storm, things are going to get better. The longer you kind of go with it, the longer you stick to it, the more time you put into it, the better you become at your craft, the better of an engineer you will be, the more business will come to you. I can guarantee that. That's something that's happened my entire career, and it will happen for you guys as well if you stick to it. So there were other times throughout my career as well where I just said, oh man, like those years or months where I was in the negatives on stuff. I also said like, hey man, what if I try to incorporate something else into my business? Like what if I start doing videos or something like that? And the same thing, I just said, sure, that might bring in a few bucks, but it's going to distract you from what you actually love to do. And that's the engineering side of things. So I didn't want to do those things. There's always been things popping into my head like that where it would distract me from my plan A. So I've never wanted to necessarily have a plan B. And this is just me personally. So, these videos are hard because it's hard for me to say what position you're in right now. So you have to take this with a grain of salt at the same time. But again, try to just hustle as much as you can and know that the more you put into it, the better it's going to become. So if you are in those situations where you feel like you're giving up and you just want to throw in the towel and just quit engineering, please don't. Please don't. Stick to it, man. You can do it. I guarantee it. Just have some faith, trust the process, have some patience. Things will get better. I guarantee it. So I hope you guys got some knowledge from that video. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. And until the next time, guys, take care.